Okay, we are back with chapter 3 of Inquiry and Innovation in the Classroom. And I remember mentioning in in either the first or second video that I did, that um, it was going, I had to remember to keep an open mind and not just automatically shut ideas down that I hadn't thought of yet or that I didn't think I agreed with. And that was really hard for this chapter because he starts out by saying, he starts by quoting Albert Einstein by saying, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Which, I read a book called Fish in a Tree. And Chris, our principal, Chris, his, part of his email response is from that book. Everybody is smart in different ways. I think it's by Linda Mullally Hunt. Great book, but it's called Fish in a Tree, and it's about a girl with dyslexia and how she has to overcome her dyslexia, and how she's misunderstood by it. So I I I I don't really know how I feel about this. I mean, you. It says you can't force. He said he used to think that, yep, that's right. You can't force a student to be something they aren't. Shame on me. But students can be a lot of things, and students can be taught new things. Students can make changes because that's how the world works. People have to make changes. Something big happens in your life and it forces you to change, what does it say? You find a new passion or something. You can live 11 different lives or something, because you focus on one thing for 8 years and you get really, really good at it, and then something changes and then your passion changes. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't entirely agree with. I think that it's excuse me. I think that it's more accurate to say instead of saying oh, I'm going to teach fish how to climb trees, I think it's what am I going to do to my students to help them be successful? I think that makes more sense. So, and then he gives the examples of oh, here are kids doing things that are impossible. None of those things are impossible. A kid starting a company and a woman adopting 13 children from Uganda, and a kid who plays program video games about destroying cancer to mimic his experience, and a girl raising a ton of money for a lemonade stand. That just sounds and I have this written down, that just sounds like a life skill. That just sounds like persistence and determination and obviously innovation, but and willing to take risks, And he says these are just a few of the thousands of stories out there of kids doing the impossible. But none of those are impossible. Anybody can do those if you give them the time and the motivation and the persistence, and if they have the intrinsic motivation, they're gonna do it no matter what. So I'm laughing at myself because I said oh, I'd come into this with an open mind, but there's just so much in here that I'm but anybody can do this, and I wonder if that's just me being a teacher or having that belief. I don't know. Or when he talks about Thomas Edison again. He talks about Thomas Edison, how he failed. He says he failed early and he failed often, and it doesn't sound impossible. It just sounds like people are willing to try new things and just try and do their best. And if they fail, who cares? They get up to do it again. I have something else I have something else underlined here too. So underneath where it says, why does innovative history repeat itself on page 25? What can we learn from history's greatest innovator? No one is going to make the next great invention because we're told to do so. Innovation most often comes from personal inquiry. Like, okay, like that makes sense. But like this sounds like this is the life skill. Like this is perseverance and persistence. And there's a really great quote. I'm sure that you've heard it before, and I'm gonna look it up. So if I'm not looking at the camera, sorry about that. Here it is. So, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. I read a Brene Brown book called Daring Greatly, where she introduced that quote. And that sounds like what this chapter is all about. Like be persistent and dare greatly. And if you fail, you try. Like, I like that. Like, at the worst, you put yourself out there and you failed. And then you pick yourself up and learn from it. This chapter was so frustrating to me because this was one where it was, I have all these great ideas but I don't have, but I am not giving you concrete ways to put them into your own classroom. So so when he talks about the Steven Johnson 7 patterns of innovation, so the adjacent possible, liquid networks, the slow hunch, serendipity, error, exaptation, that's a hard word for me, exaptation, yeah, and platforms, like, so I only have 30 music classes a year, tops, with my kids, and it's like, oh, the slow hunch, it usually takes time for ideas to connect and evolve into something tangible. And I've written down like 20% of my time is 6 classes, or like the equivalent of 4 hours. Like, is that enough for kids to, is that enough time for kids to be truly innovative? Like, do I just say, like, if I create a project and just say like, all right, just do what you can in 6 weeks, or do what you can in 6 classes, and whatever you have is going to be fine. Because like, I can't ask kids to do this outside of school. Like, that's my class. I know I'm resisting. I know I'm not being open to new ideas right now. But like, I could understand if this was like ELA or social studies or math or science. Like, I can imagine teachers giving kids homework and being like, okay, when you go home, like, try doing this for 20 minutes, or work on this project or whatever. But like, as a specials teacher in an elementary classroom, giving kids homework is like, that's just not something that I can do, you know? Like, I grade kids I don't even give kids letter grades. I give kids an E, an S, a P, or an NI. Like, an excellent is satisfactory, a progressing, or needs improvement. Like, which, again, maybe the process versus product, like, maybe I'm totally coming at this all wrong too. Oh, man. So this is like so hard. I mean, the one that I certainly agree with in these 7 patterns of innovation is like error. Like, noise and error are often associated with unpredictability. Unpredictability is a key component to innovation. Fail fast and keep moving on. Innovation will then happen. I absolutely 100% agree with this. Like, that was me learning how to be a teacher. Like, some of my lesson plans were terrible. Even the last 2 years, I've had some terrible lesson plans. But I thought about like, all right, this didn't go right. Let's fix it the next time I teach it. And the next time I did it would be great. And like the slow hunch, it takes time for ideas to connect and evolve into something tangible. I absolutely agree. But some of my best ideas, weeks or months for it to all come together, for me to go to music teacher workshops and like collaborate with those people. I have like the yes, this sounds like a great idea, but is it feasible mindset right now? And I know I have that, and it's like I'm but it's so hard to be open because this sounds like an absolutely impossible task, and he's not giving really that many ideas of how you're going to make this happen. Like he's talking about the Y combiner, which like great, like absolutely great idea. And it said, one of the sentences is like, let's look at how YC, so the Y combiner, functions as a community of innovators, such as on page 27. And my comment was like, are we trying to make this happen in classrooms, like all the time? Or am I getting ahead of... I checked myself there. I'm like, wait, am I getting ahead of myself? Like, do I just need to read? And like maybe later in the book he'll address these. So, I mean, like the building a community of innovators, like all of these, it's the great but mindset that I have. Like team dinners, like a speaker talks about like how they were able to be innovative, and there's time for questions and talking and collaborations. I'm like, okay, great. Office hours, they can just sign up for any length block of time that they want to. There is no limit to the time. And like the alumni connections, like, okay, getting in touch with people who have done this before, like, and getting help from people like experts in the field. And those are all for me like great, but like I don't know how to do this in a music classroom where I only see the kids 30 times, Like maybe if I had them like year after year after year after year, if I had them from K through 6, maybe at that point, like they'd be able to do something, I don't know, like it's so hard for me. Like I wish that I could have them K through 6 and then use their entire 6th grade year to like work on this project, like work on something related to music that's like incredible, that could that like would be very innovative and change how things are done, change how I see things, change how other kids see things, like have the resources to collaborate with different people in their classes or people in other classes, or have the time to get in touch with experts, because 6 classes, like 8 weeks, that's not a lot of time. Like this chapter is making me feel very discouraged, So I don't know. I mean, this is a hard chapter for me. I'm sorry. Oh. I mean, I like, so what do they have? I argue we should allow for Johnson's patterns to naturally create ideas and connections. In order to do this, we must set up the learning experience as a platform, like allow for collaboration, failure, and inquiry. Again, do I have enough time to do this? Like, I will say this. I do love his emphasis on keep asking questions. Like, maybe you won't get the right answer immediately. Maybe there isn't a right answer. Maybe there's lots of different ways to approach it. Just keep asking questions, because the questions that lead to other questions, they are valuable, and they do lead to answers maybe in ways you didn't expect. Like, I don't know, asking myself, like, how do I get more movement into the classroom? How do I get 3rd graders to dance? How do I make this work? How do I make this happen? Like, okay, this circle game didn't really work. How else do I do it? Oh, I add instruments to it. Great. I call it a game. Great. Okay, like that worked. How do I make it better? Like always questioning. I do appreciate that. Like you always question. Then it says make time for reflection, sharing, and tinkering, which again, if you have the time to do that, I think that's excellent. But like, sort of like reflection, like, okay, maybe at the end of class, do you give them a ticket out the door and you say like, okay, what did you work on today? Or like, what's something new that you learned today? What are your goals for next class or whatever? But that takes time too. I only have 40 minutes. So I give them 35, I give them 5 minutes to get in and get settled, or like 5 minutes to give them the directions, 30 minutes for them to work, and then 5 minutes to do a reflection. Like, and then for sharing should be open and not be given a time limit. That's hard too. And like tinkering, I absolutely love that idea. I think that's a great idea. I would be happy if a kid put out a project that was like, I just tried a bunch of these different things for 6 consecutive classes, and I tried really hard, and nothing came out of it, but here's where I think I would want it to go. I would love that. That would be ideal. Wonderful. And it does say support new ideas, project-based learning, and on-demand learning. And 2 out of 3 of those. Like, I like the new ideas, and I support new ideas and support project-based learning. And like the way that I've traditionally taught, supporting new ideas, kids have good ideas, and I've stolen some of their ideas, and I say, hey, can I steal that idea? I'll give you credit for it, but can I steal that? Because that's way better than my idea. And it's also why I like to give them creative opportunities in class, because their ideas and like how they end up doing things half the time is way more creative than I could do, way more innovative. But the on-demand learning, again, like if I had these kids in like a gen ed class, like it would be so much easier for me, I think, to like give them homework on, like, go to this website and do this homework and then explore this site and see what you find. Like, I mean, maybe I could do that in music, but like, that's hard for me. I can only influence this to a certain extent. But I wrote down in my notes, but I can try. I can make the effort to look for things like that. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility. That's me being a good teacher and pushing my students. And then last, in the classrooms, you want to assess growth, critical thinking, and grit. So growth is, this one just dovetails so well with music, because you want the students to continue growing and don't worry about the final project. Now with concerts, it's a little bit different. But in most of my lessons, like, you could stop kind of at any point during the way. Like my kids creating a 4-part ensemble for Orff instruments. We could stop it at 2, we could stop it at 3, but it just matters, like, the creating matters. And then if it sounds good at the end, that's great. In chorus, it doesn't really work that way. You just have to kind of get that final product. You got to get it as best you can, because then performances, it's like, oh, if it's a crappy performance, why are we giving money to the chorus program? But if it's a good performance, people might like continue to support the chorus program and then be supportive of me doing stuff like taking the kids to Darien Lake or taking the kids to sing at the Red Wings game. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me. But look, I was open-minded to it. And I love this, like, critical thinking. What does critical thinking look like, and what does it mean? And I love that it's like, it's when students solve a problem with their own knowledge. That's great. And I like inquiry will lead students to a long list of problems and issues that they will have to solve. And I like that. I mean, that's how I work. If I don't know something, I look it up or ask somebody else. Which I guess is an easy way to collaborate in the classroom, is asking your peers. Oh my gosh. And this is where the chapter's coming back to slap me in the face. So I appreciate this. I think I do some of it in the classroom already. I think that I need to learn how to help the students a little bit more get to that point, because maybe they'll compose something and I'll be like, oh, do you like that? Does that work? And they'll be like, yeah. And I'll be like, did you try it? They're like, yeah. I'm like, because I don't want to be like, try it again. But like, okay, like they're gonna make it work. So I have to got to figure out how to help them with their critical thinking skills a bit more, I think. And then Grit, I listened to that book. I remember Karen Cameron talking about it first year of new teacher training, and I listened to it this year, and I love it, and I think that kids should be, I wonder if like grit is like a byproduct of being able to take control of your own learning, because if the content of what you're learning motivates you, then I feel like you would be more likely to be more willing to puzzle things out and to ask questions, and even if you get frustrated, you're willing to work through it. So I love grit. And I do like one of his final sentences. Our focus has to be on making school a place where innovation happens all the time. I love that. Now, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself now because I'm like, oh my God, I have to do that right now. My students have to be innovators all the time starting day one of school. Like, no, it's okay. I know that I'm not doing my students a disservice by not helping them out like in this particular way all the time. I know that I'm not a bad teacher. Maybe this is just something that I can continue to work on. So I gotta process this a little bit more. Gotta process this chapter and just like recognize like you're putting up barriers that maybe don't necessarily need to be there. So I'm gonna go on to chapter 4 for next time. And oh look, chapter 4, designing 20% time for the classroom. Maybe this will help me like really really feel better about what I read in chapter 3. So until then, peace out. See you later.